Welcome to Outlook Talks. We're sitting with Rupleena Bose and we're going to discuss her debut novel, The Summer of Ben. I read your book and I have to say it was really impressive. What an impressive debut. And everyone is saying it, right? Are you happy with it?
Yeah, thank you. More people read it, more people like it. Of course, what else do you want? That's exactly what a writer would like.
Of course. A lot of people are saying that this is one of the most contemporary, set in a more contemporary situation than other Indian novels of late. Can I ask you why you decided to set it in this particular decade? Did it have anything to do with the politics, or it has been compared,
Yeah. Basically, I read all these novels. Like, I was a big fan of Rachel Cusk. I was a big fan of Sheila Heti. A lot of these writers, Deborah Levy. And they used to write about women, and it was contemporary. Women were going on holidays, discovering their sexuality, love, desire, betrayal. And I just felt that why can't we have a novel about us and about like somebody who's also flawed, maybe, And if you're writing about India, you cannot bypass the politics of what is happening. So while it is set in 2010 to 20, which is where it ends, you could also look at it as something which, which could be this decade as well. But I needed to set it a little apart for, because sometimes you can't see a lot of things directly, particularly, the larger political aspect.
Yes.
So
it is a little bit like the coming of age, even though your protagonist is 20, in the sense of she's really growing into herself, right? And little bit is set against a coming of age of India as well, where India sort of becomes this global power and all these people become super rich, which is something you address in the book, the caste, the class difference, the growing inequalities. Do you want to speak a little bit about that? Why this decision to talk about that and so poignantly?
Yeah, the thing is that what I felt was that, in India, you can actually, if you'd like, if you compare it to a Bangladesh, Pakistan, a lot of other countries, India, you can, if you are well educated, if you go through good schooling, good education, at some point of time, I'm not talking about the India of today, honestly, but like maybe the 2000s, you could do anything. You had the desire, you could try to do anything, but actually it's not true. Somewhere you are bound by your class, and my protagonist, even though, and that's why I put a teacher at the helm of it, an English teacher, because firstly we don't see novels like that in India. At least I didn't find contemporary English teacher, because you're also doing something which is very interesting, like how many people read literature, how many people read books.
Correct.
So that observation of inside, outside, what is happening in the academia, in your city, in yourself, and of course the realization that class is very important. So that is something which I needed to have my protagonist talk about, because that is what makes her.
It's almost a character in your novel, the class.
Yeah.
Class is almost a character in your novel, right?
But some of it is also unconscious, I would say. When I finished it, I realized that, oh, okay. And I think,
were you feeling those feelings that you were writing?
That after I finished it, I felt that, oh, okay, there's a lot of class in it. While it's not, I didn't set out to write about it, but I set out to definitely write about this girl vis-a-vis the nation, this girl vis-a-vis the city. So,
and then set it in two very, very strong Indian cities, Calcutta and Delhi.
Yeah.
Now, who could not be more different, even the cities. So you grew up in Calcutta?
No, I grew up in Madras, actually, which is not in the book.
Which is not in the book.
So I grew up in Madras. Before that, actually, I was born in Patna. So, and then I came to Delhi and I did my college here.
And now you teach
I teach in
Sri Venkateshwara College.
Yes, I teach there.
How is that, meeting all these young people? It's something you mention also in the book, right? There's a whole thread of a Muslim boy who gets killed during an honor killing incident. Is that something that was close to your heart? There are obviously such stories. And then around the time you were writing the book, there was the Ankit Saxena case, and it was all over.
Yeah.
Was that sort of where you drew the inspiration from?
Like, this didn't happen. This incident didn't happen. But what happened was, like, the fact is that when I was writing Summer of Ben, I was not teaching at that time. I was on a long leave for my PhD. So it was April 2020 was when I started it. And I remembered this moment, that moment. I said, oh my God, there's a pandemic. I need to escape. I need to think about nicer things, a different decade, like parties and, everything else that is in a different decade. That's how I started. Everything which was not possible at that point of time in April 2020. And that's when I started writing. So I was actually not even a teacher at that time. I had not taught for almost 3.5 years. So which is why it felt like becoming someone else. And somehow this boy's character just came, I guess the subconscious of the politics of the nation. It came when I started writing. I didn't plan it. Yeah.
So did you plot this novel a little bit even, or was it like one of those pantsers?
No, I did plot it a bit. Actually, the primary character who I got was Pat. But I realized that I can't tell Pat's story in first person. I have to be someone else, and then Pat comes in. So that was the starting. The primary objective was this woman, the two men she meets, and parallelly Pat's story of being a teacher in the same college.
Is that why the character is unnamed?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I didn't need to name it. I mean, I had a name in my head, but then I realized like 40, 50 pages have gone and the name is not required.
To be honest, I read 40, 50 pages before I realized you hadn't named the character. I was like, what's her name?
Yeah, and also I wanted it to be like something like every person. Like, when you say I, there is like,
an immediate recognition.
Yeah. So whoever is reading it can be there.
That's a good tactic to get people to sort of identify. Yeah. Though I don't think they'll have trouble identifying with the characters.
Well, I hope so.
No, of course, a young woman in her 20s in a love triangle is. So tell me a little bit more about the motivations behind this book. You said you wanted to write about all the things that weren't happening during the pandemic. But when you're reading this book, there's also a lot about class envy. There's a lot, like I said, class and caste are a character. Even when she marries the upper caste man, the mother-in-law says you should be happy to take his last name. Some of these things, do they happen from your own experiences, or have you drawn from experiences around you?
No, I have they're definitely not from my own experience. But having said that, I remember somebody told me that, people often say that, caste is we never talked about class, amongst this very educated public school lot, we often say that we don't talk about caste. And somebody said that's because, you didn't have to. If you were me, you would have known. You would have talked about caste. And I think that is what stayed in my head. And the caste aspect, actually comes from the grandmother's story, because that is where she has a relationship, and that guy is a Brahmin. So that was what I wanted to essentially highlight of. But the fact that somewhere some of these things sort of spill over decades.
Well, of course, because it is a pervasive topic in India, right? So it's I like that about the book. I liked even that scene where the mother-in-law is talking, because it was very real. Something that you don't see often in contemporary novels, especially about love stories and so on. They just gloss over this stuff. I like that you didn't gloss over it. Was that a conscious decision?
Yeah, I mean, I could have removed it, but it's a couple of lines in the subsequent drafts. But then I didn't, because to me it had to resonate with the grandmother's story, because that is what reveals in the end that the guy that she likes, whatever, there's a caste angle to it. So which is why I thought that I have to keep these two parallel, because they are in a way parallel.
They are in a way parallel. You mentioned the grandmother, and I can't help noticing that you've also dedicated the book to your dadi. Right? Can you tell me a little bit about your dadi? What was she like? She obviously made an impression. She's a teller of stories.
Yeah, she used to tell a lot of stories. Let me qualify this book and these experiences have got nothing to do with her at all. But what happened was because my grandmother would be constantly telling me stories. And I think I was one of those very weird kids, I think, who was like from age 10, I would say, I want to be a writer, I want to be a professor, so like very weird. And I would be reading all the time. And my grandmother would also be like telling all kinds of stories, like Bengali stories, like Tagore, of course, a lot of Tagore.
Like what? Tell us a story.
Tagore, she told me all of the ghost stories. A lot of ghost stories she would tell me. And Tagore, Gora was a story that she had first told me about. Then so many. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee was something. Before reading, I heard the whole story in parts. So which is why I tell her that.
And which is why your next one might be a detective novel.
Yeah. It might be. Let's see.
So, I think that's lovely. And you have qualified and said this has nothing to do with, like, the story isn't. But bringing in this grandmother's character and so on, there's a lot in here about the interior voices of women, which we don't see so often, especially in Indian literature. Again, I want to ask you, was that a sort of conscious decision to make it so interior, so within themselves, almost always thinking your characters are almost always talking to themselves in the book.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, as women, you and I know we are perpetually thinking, right? You are
Yeah.
always thinking about what to
Yeah.
do and how to be
Yeah.
careful and how to like even
Mhm.
how to keep your hair in.
Yeah,
Right. So all of this came out very beautifully. I have to ask you, some of these characters that you made, like Ria's character and so on, were they based on people that you knew? Did you sort of like pick them up from, you know, your experiences, or maybe just like watching society?
No, definitely some of the characters, they're little bits of people I have taken,
Mhm.
not Ria. Ria is a totally imaginary character who I
She's
really
very real.
liked. Viola as well. But there's
Mhm.
certain things, obviously, which I've merged, like two people I know, I've taken a little aspect of them, merged it with another person. But one thing about the grandmother, I must say that my grandmother was a widow. So I really didn't know many things about her personal life. I only knew about the things that she would tell me about stories. So I think that was the subconscious why I created this character. So there is that as well.
And is that a thread that you've seen across your childhood and so on? Because here's what I've noticed in the book, right? Is a lot of the stuff is very personal, in the sense of these are things that most people don't talk about often. And often, like you said, you won't know your grandmother's personal stories. You won't know your mother's backstory. They don't share them with us. Right? And then there's this sense in your book of the super candidness, where all these stories are being shared, like just simply without any, you know, coyness, anything, even the affair and so on. How did that feel? Like, what was the reaction to that? How did other people, your editors, agents, react to the candidness of your book?
Yeah, they really liked it. I must say, when I sent it to my agent first, and she really liked it. She said, I have not read anything like this, and then she compared it to several female writers who I had not read at that point of time. I read Sally Rooney, of course, somewhere in between. And then she said, she said something like deep dive, that you do a deep dive into the self. I think that's the word Radhika had used. And she said that it's so nice. I mean, there's such a lovely moment which is constantly created. And where, you're talking about yourself, you almost feel that she's in a conversation with herself. But frankly, I didn't think of it like that. I mean, that would be like really, like, what a lonely girl. No conversation.
I know. I also got that. Like I said, like it really felt like there was a lot of inner talk of these women, and you get a front row seat into that, which is very rare these days, especially with these sort of characters. Your characters are very bold. They're doing exactly what they want. Your English teacher wants to be an activist in the middle for this Muslim boy. And these are sort of things where you normally, when you see characters like this in India's books or even in cinema, they're action oriented. There's not a lot of inner dialogue. Whereas in this book, it's almost all inner dialogue. So that was very interesting to read. And you unpacked it quite beautifully. Was it difficult? These are some very hard feelings you're writing about: the envy, even the abuse with the grandmother-in-law, and the affairs, how to feel. These are difficult things that you're writing about, and difficult not just to articulate, but difficult even to put out there. So how was that for you when you were writing this?
I think what helped was it was really quiet. When I was writing it, there was no sound around.
Was this because you were in Goa?
Yeah, because I was in this small village, and it was, like I wrote it in 9-10 months, I think. April to December was the time. Because I had to finish a PhD after that. So I was like, oh my God, I have to write this.
I read that.
PhD.
You wrote this while you were writing your PhD.
Yeah. So I was like, I have to write this. There's a deadline because... So then I was writing this book. And because there was a lot of silence around, I think that helped in the unpacking, because you're only hearing your
own self,
voice. And the other thing that I think helped was that I would write one every day. One chapter every day. So
chapter every day.
Yeah. Wow. One chapter. It's exactly the way it is. It's gone through several drafts, but it starts with weather, the season, spring.
Yeah.
Because, in pandemic, what was spring and what was... there was it was very strange. So it starts with spring, and that's how then I move to the next section, next season, next city. And it goes on for 10 years. To separate 10 years is not easy. So you have to grow also.
That is what I was wondering. Like, it's not at all easy to separate. And you go seamlessly back and forth quite often in the book as well. I have to ask you, what were your inspirations in writing this book? You said Sally Rooney, but you also said there were a lot of people you were compared to that you hadn't read. Who are the authors that you like reading?
Oh, like so many authors. No, Sally Rooney was not my inspiration. I must qualify that I read it, I think, after I'd finished the first draft or something like that. And then, of course, everybody compared and all of that. But I think my greatest inspiration would be Virginia Woolf, Orhan Pamuk, who I love.
I see a lot of Orhan Pamuk.
Who I just love. There is Rachel Cusk, I would say, was a very big inspiration, because I read that novel where she's a professor and she goes to Crete. I think it's Outline.
Yes.
Because I read a lot of Second Place, Outline. All of them I really like. And that's when I thought, oh my God, see, she's a professor, she's going to Greece and she's going on a residency and she's meeting people. Why must we not? Why
not write about it?
We have a story like that. And I felt like I wanted to read something like that. And that's why I started
with
writing.
An Indian woman, finally.
With an Indian woman. And, which is, so in a way, it's very sort of dysfunctional. So you want to write what you want to read, which is not out there.
That's fair enough. I mean, I feel like that is just the best way to write, right? Like you write something that you want to read.
Well, I tried, I was initially writing a detective novel.
Yes,
so what happened was I had written a detective novel and it was in the first draft. But with the pandemic, April 2020, I just said that I can't go back and do a draft of this. It's not me. I have changed. The world has changed. Something new has to be started. And that's when I thought that who are the people I like? And I thought Pamuk, Rachel Cusk, Deborah Levy is somebody I just love. And Virginia Woolf, of course, forever favorite.
I can see the Orhan Pamuk.
I think Pamuk, I'm a big fan of Pamuk.
Yeah, no, because I can see what you mean, because there is obviously Pamuk is also very interior.
Yeah.
A lot of it is thought, a lot of it is detail. Seasons are extremely important to him.
Yeah.
Seasons, I remember reading some book of him where he was describing the window for like 3 pages. Snow, I think it's in snow.
Yeah.
And so I can see that. I thought that you reminded me of Anita Desai. I think I said yes.
Yeah, you just said Anita Desai. I love, of course, and I've taught Anita Desai Clear Light of Day.
Yes,
and maybe it was subconscious because I really enjoyed teaching and I enjoyed writing Anita Desai. She was not there. The book was not there with me at that point of time. I remember in my bookshelf. Because that bookshelf is in my locker at the university.
You have a bookshelf in your locker?
Yeah, I mean, there's a locker where there are books which you teach.
Okay.
So it was there. So.
Okay. I was like, is there a bookshelf in your locker? That's quite cool.
Yeah, the locker is the bookshelf, actually. It's a locker you pick up and they have all these texts which we teach. Like, Dubliners is there. I don't know why Dubliners is there.
Makes sense. There's a whole bunch of... I mean,
Desai is there. Waiting for Godot is there. All those
At least
texts.
they moved on from sort of Jane Austen, which is what they were teaching when we were in university.
We do teach Jane Austen. But I do like George Eliot, another person I really liked, Middlemarch.
Yeah.
And in fact, subconsciously, Middlemarch was something which is an inspiration because it had that suffrage, the vote, what we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
That woman, new jobs, new kind of identity. That's
definitely. And also Middlemarch doesn't directly obviously talk about it, but it's a lot about class.
Yeah,
almost every English novel from that part is about class because it was so unequal back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps that's why in India right now with this emerging inequality, you also felt the need to write about it.
Of course, like Suitable Boy.
Yes.
Vikram Seth. I love Arundhati Roy.
Of course.
And so many Indian writers. It's so difficult.
What do you think of the Indian writing scene now, though? Like, as contemporary novels are coming out, Arundhati Roy it's been a while. I mean, she hasn't written a book since the Museum of
Ministry of Happiness. I have that. Utmost Happiness.
Yes, Utmost Happiness. And yes, she's contemporary. But what I mean is in the last 10, 15 years, our age, authors.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are your thoughts on them? Who are your favorites? And who would you like to read more of?
So many. Ajhumpa Lahiri I love. I forgot to mention her actually. But so many writers. I read a lot of fiction all the time. Who is I like Anuradha Roy, The Folded Earth, for example. And as I said, I like Vikram Seth. I like Salman Rushdie. I like Arundhati Roy. I also like Nilanjana Roy's Wildlings because it's about the story of a cat. And we have cats. So it's something that I thought that, wow, to get into this, that space. It's something wonderful. And I also, of course, Amitav Ghosh, Shadow Lines, everybody likes. Who doesn't like? Just let me, sorry.
Within the women, who do you think is your favorite?
My favorite?
She's every...
It's tough though to say one favorite.
That's
though,
fair.
like,
there's so many good
there's
authors.
so many. Yeah. Well, Avni Doshi I write as well. Now I remember.
Avni Doshi, I liked her work.
Avni Doshi. I haven't read Preeti Taneja, who I want to read. She did a retelling of Lear. So that's something which I want to read. And
I mean, Rupleena, now let's discuss. You said you wrote this in 10 months, which I'm sure you know is a breakneck speed for a novel. Some of us have taken 7 years. So what is your advice for other novelists, the inspiring ones? Even I'm sure some of your students, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure they've come and asked you already now.
Yeah,
so what sort of advice do you give them?
So, this one was 10 months, but that was a very specific 10 months of 2020 where literally the world shut down, so you could only escape. I could only escape. I think, and such a cliched thing to say, write every day, it really works.
It does work.
So sorry, but it really works. I think finding that one space or time when you can, not space, essentially, time, like either, in the morning or one time where you're sort of away from responsibilities, domesticity, and you can just sort of fly. I think that would be something that I would advise. Like, one page, 500 words, 400 words, doesn't matter. I have done that also forever. And while this one took 10 months, before that I've taken 3 years for the detective novel also, and I see another year in
the
that.
making.
So it differs from story to story.
So it sounds almost like you're saying don't compare.
Yeah. 2020, I think that year, that time was something else. I know that I also I don't have that speed actually. So
no, this is lovely. And this is a great conversation. You were telling me that your book launch is coming up?
Yeah, that's book is already out there, but it's in conversation, which we are doing, and a formal sort of launch kind of a thing we are doing in Habitat, which is on 1st of August. And it's a conversation which will have a dramatized reading by Rahul Ram, who's also a musician.
Yes.
And an in conversation with Pragya Tiwari and me.
So it's very exciting. You must be excited with debut novel, everything coming out, busy.
Yeah. No, I think I'm most excited when people read it. That is because actually it's very quiet. There's this emptiness. Once your book is out, you're no longer with the characters. So while I wrote in 10 months, I also did several drafts, and that's another cliched, sorry, for every aspiring writer, that you have to give it time. Like first draft, give it time, let it sit for 2 months or whatever, and then do another draft, and then give it time, do another draft. So I did several drafts. Yeah, I did several drafts after that first spate.
So that cliche of the first draft is your throwaway draft.
Yeah. No, I didn't but I did throw away several things. I added also several things, I must say.
Okay. And now what's your next plan? What's next for Rupleena?
So the next is I want to obviously go back to writing, because that's the nicest time.
Yeah.
Like everything
not
else
university teaching.
Yeah, teaching is nice. It's high energy, but I always wanted to write. It's also teaching takes away journalism. It must be the same for you. It takes away so much of your time and energy, and there's nothing left. So we have to really protect that 1 hour. And so nowadays I write anywhere. I write in my staff room. I write in the car. I write.
Wherever anyway, you keep a notebook on you, basically.
Yeah. No, laptop.
Your laptop is with you. Wow.
Yeah.
Then that's the other cliche that we can say, write anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But did you feel like you really needed to maybe engage the senses and so on? It does. Your book engages the senses. You write with all 6.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
or does maybe the food thing come from being Bengali? Because, it's a cliche.
I think being Bengali, but I think most important was that during the pandemic, we were not going to restaurants or pubs. I think that drove me, because if you see right at the beginning, there's a pub.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was something that, just the interaction and the busyness and the music and sound. And
so you kind of created your own little party, basically.
Yeah. You can say that, actually.
That's nice. Yeah. And it is like that. It's nice to read. It's a lovely book, and it's an amazing debut. Very affecting voice you have. It was really lovely talking to you, and I hope to see you during your launch, and I hope to read much more of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and it was lovely talking to you.